Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. And a reminder, multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also find us on Twitter, #GiantsChat. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So training camp is officially underway. First practice today.
Happy New Year, Lance.
Pressers. Yes.
Happy New Year. 2023. The ball has fallen in Times Square.
And they have a new studio here for us, a new background to usher in the new campaign.
Yes, we debuted it yesterday.
Yes, you did. Well, I was here on Monday when they were actually tearing the place down, and Pearson and company had the hammers and the nails out. So I actually got to see the entire process play out. I don't know if you had the pleasure or the luxury to do that.
No.
I just wanted to make sure the record is set to witness the fact that I was here for that. But let's get to some actual substance for once, which is nice because football is back. And I want to start with the biggest news of the day, Paul, and that is the fact that the Giants have locked up Andrew Thomas, their left tackle, to a long-term extension, a 5-year deal. Obviously, the Giants do not report the breakdown of the contract, but Joe Schoen spoke earlier today, and one of the things that I found interesting that he mentioned, Paul, was in Buffalo, when he worked under Brandon Beane, he said they never shied away from hammering out long-term deals with players prior to the expiration of the rookie deal.
Correct.
And I was looking this up. Deion Dawkins, who's Buffalo's left tackle, he actually signed a 4-year extension back in 2020, right before the start of the season, very similar to Andrew Thomas. Now, the difference was, of course, Dawkins was a second-round pick in 2017. Andrew Thomas, a first-round pick in 2020. But it's interesting how going into the fourth seasons for both players, right, they saw enough. They came to the conclusion, these guys are the anchors of the offensive line, and they invested accordingly. So this is an example of you can work at Buffalo, you're influenced by what the Bills do, and you're going to carry on that philosophy here to the New York Giants.
We've talked about this ever since Joe Schoen got here to the Giants, that there would be a lot of residue that he would bring with him from Buffalo. And quite frankly, we've seen it since day one. From the very moment he got here, we have noticed how he conducts his business. And I think that the thing that I'm very impressed with more than anything else is that in retrospect, if you look at the Giants offseason and were to go back several months and list a bunch of things that you think they probably needed to do, you would probably have every single one of those things checked off. I'm so impressed. Now, it doesn't mean the results will all come to fruition.
Sure.
But I'm truly impressed at how he has been able to navigate his checklist and knock off the to-do things. I mean, as I sit here today, I can't think of one thing that he absolutely had to do to improve this team during the offseason that he did not address. I can't think of one.
Well, they brought in competition across the board, which is what he highlighted during his training camp opening presser. And the common theme now is, especially if you look at this offseason, you locked up Daniel Jones, you locked up Dexter Lawrence, you did the same thing with Andrew Thomas. You'd put maybe Xavier McKinney, the next one on the list, but once again, I think he has to hold up this season. You want to see that he can get through an entire campaign, but the common element here in play, Paul, is, and we talked about this on previous installments of this show and in previous years, you want to get to the point where you're building the nucleus of your team through the draft. You bring these guys in, you develop them, and then they warrant second contracts. That, to me, is a sign of a healthy, constructed team.
Yep.
So we just went over multiple positions in various different draft classes who the Giants have awarded a second contract. If you go back 7, 8 years, maybe even further back, the trend wasn't that multiple draft picks would get multi-year extensions. It didn't work like that. Now it's becoming routine. And that, to me, is a very positive development, that they've brought in these players, they've groomed them, they've seen enough through the early stages of the rookie contract, and that has justified an extension. And Andrew Thomas, once again, is just the latest to fit under that profile.
Well, if you want to look at this through another angle of the prism, we talk all the time about core elements to a playoff competitive football team. It will always start in the trenches. The Giants are clearly improving in the trenches, whether it be amongst starters or in the depth category.
Sure.
They're obviously getting better in both of those situations, offensive trenches and defensive trenches. They've got their franchise quarterback. They've got the franchise running back tied up. They've enhanced their wide receiving core. They've got their 2 tackles they think are going to be here for a long time. They've got some young pass rushers on the edge who they're very, very pleased with. They've got a first-round draft pick cover corner in Tay Banks, who, they think is going to be here for a very long time. I mean, looking at it from that angle of the prism, when you say, what are the key elements for a football team to try to make a run and to go on a 3 or 4 year stretch of competitive football, well, he's got all the elements. The only one but that could be a little bit lacking, depending upon how you believe the depth is at corner, if Adoree Jackson winds up leaving at the end of this season, okay, well then one of your corners has to be addressed. But they have a lot of other corners on this roster.
Yeah, younger options, sure.
And somebody may wind up graduating over there anyway. But the key fundamental foundations of what you want moving forward to make a 2 or 3 year burst are all here. Think about that, Lance. I'm going to say I'm about as impressed with Joe Schoen right now as I was when George Young did what he did to help turn around the Giants from the dark ages. And even though he started in 79 and it took them till 81 to make the playoffs, it was their 3rd season, I'm about as impressed as I could be.
Well, I could see how he is shaped and influenced by, once again, what he went through in Buffalo. You could tell that through the short period of time that Joe Schoen has been here. And it's no surprise, coaches and players will say the same thing, right? It rubs off on you when you're around people that conduct their business a certain way. It's just the way he's gone about extensions, the positions he's prioritized, what he addresses in free agency versus the draft. It's a heavy influence of what I think the Bills did to get to the point where the Giants want to get to. And they did it also, where you have a young quarterback, you try to boost the talent around the quarterback. You need multiple draft classes, right, to develop. How many times have we said, Paul, it's not just the 2023 draft class, it's multiple installments of the draft classes. And here's evidence of that fact that they feel like they're getting a lot of bang for the buck with respect to the draft classes already based on who they have invested money. So everything is trending in the right direction, and now it's a matter of these guys, A, staying healthy and continuing to produce. But the other thing that I think Joe Schoen highlighted, and you could tell that based on the makeup of this roster in the locker room, is guys are passionate for one another when they get deals done and contracts. You could tell. For example, when a number of the players spoke today, they said when Andrew Thomas walked in the building in a suit today, they knew something was up, right? Because it's not like every day he walks in all dressed up.
Which is more than we all knew, I'll tell you that right
well,
now.
There you go. Well, he had a formal contractual signing expedition to go on, so that explained why he dressed up. But in all seriousness, I do think that they're happy for one another when they see across the board that the team is investing in them.
Well, we talk about team unity and team chemistry a lot of times, and people think that the business side of it bleeds into the locker room more than it really does. Yes, it's true. Guys are aware of numbers because they're all publicly announced in the media, whether or not it's leaked or it's flat out announced. Like I believe Andrew Thomas's people actually put out the details on his deal. And yes, to some degree, it is something that they're aware of, so they're happy when one of their teammates or one of their brothers, if you will, gets a good deal. Sure, they're happy for that. But I want to make something very clear to everybody out there. As many years as I've been doing this, there is not a lot of conversation, if at all, in the locker room amongst players about who got what. And did you get yours? And am I going to get mine? And did he get his? That doesn't happen very much. And the reason I think it doesn't happen, and maybe you have a theory on this, I think the reason it doesn't happen is because when you have a coaching staff, specifically like the Giants do, where they treat everybody equally, I'm very impressed with how well this coaching staff handles this team, this roster, and these players. And you're up front with them, and at practice, and in games. Those players get what those coaches are telling them. They say it. This is what it is. There's no favoritism. There's none of this. There's none of that. it is what it is. We're being upfront, we're being honest with you, and we're letting everybody know what the truth is and what the deal is. I think when you have that type of atmosphere that's fostered by coaches who have that openness and honesty, it's much easier for players to bond together without talking about business. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I'm hanging my hat on.
I think it also delves into what I like to crown not counting other people's money. I don't think players are interested in that. I don't think they get into that hobby. So that's another reason why it's not necessarily discussed as maybe widespread as people anticipate.
Well, it doesn't do anybody any good.
Exactly.
To be frank with you, okay, and I don't know how many people out there might be in this boat, but you have other people you work with at your job who may or may not be in the same category. Well, the truth of the matter is, I would never want to know. I would never want to know, because if you know other people's numbers, it could warp your attitude or your opinion. And my way of thinking is, if you're going to be one for all and all for one, and you're going to be a team, you're a heck of a lot better being ignorant about it, right? Ignorant is bliss. You're just better off saying we're all going to be in for the team, and it's all about the team. And guess what? If the team wins, we all get something out of it.
Well, the reason why this conversation is relevant also is Joe Schoen was asked about the negotiations with Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
After he talked about Andrew Thomas, and questions came in left and right about the nature of the negotiations and if there's any concern about how it could carry over into the locker room, if you recall, Paul. And Joe Schoen's response was he wasn't concerned about guys having conversations, to your point, about their contracts. And he's learned that from his experiences working for other organizations too. And I have heard the same exact sentiments from doing various shows with various former NFL executives. They seem to indicate that it's a narrative formulated from fans and the media when there's concern about if contract negotiations don't go according to plan, and you're worried about other players are going to be concerned because they're going to say, well, wait a minute, player A didn't get a contract. I'm scheduled to be a free agent a year from now. What does that mean for my status? I have yet to hear a front office executive ever express any concern that that's something that is talked about at great length and detail in NFL locker rooms.
Yeah. I think what we need to remember is that the business part is the business part, and the football part is the football part. It does, unfortunately, impact the football part. But as far as a player's mentality and a coach's mentality, look, they are very ill-served to spend a chunk of their mental or emotional energy on that stuff. It can't possibly help them.
It's out of your control, essentially. So why waste energy and time on that? Now, as far as Saquon Barkley is concerned, he was present here for the first day of training camp. We saw him. He was on the field. He caught a touchdown in the corner as he was coming out of the backfield. So everybody's happy that he has arrived, that the contract negotiations are behind them, and Joe Schoen would not get into details in terms of what this means for the future of Saquon Barkley because, just like you said, there's no worry or no need to waste energy and stuff that you can't control. The bottom line is they can't negotiate a new deal even if they wanted to.
Correct.
Until after this season. So it defeats the purpose if you're even going to go down that road to try to anticipate what is going to happen in 2024 or beyond that.
I think the key for Dable and Kafka, the guys who are orchestrating this offense, is that at least they know their guy is here from the get-go. He was already out there running some plays today.
Yep.
Now, folks, day one, okay? Helmets, that's it. Shirts and shorts, no contact, okay? In theory, no contact. If a guy tripped and fell, that's one thing.
So you mean we shouldn't crown players after today's practice?
No, not at all.
Is that what you're insinuating?
Not
okay.
at all.
I wasn't sure. I thought the jury was still out on that.
This is a non-contact practice today. I only mentioned about Barkley because he made a terrific diving catch of a stab in the right corner of the end zone from Daniel Jones. And it was the first, I think it was the first, let me see, it was the first touchdown of the deep red zone drill that started the practice session. The first pass went to Waller, and it was short of the end zone. And then the second pass went to a diving Barkley, who caught the score in front of Xavier McKinney. And, of course, Barkley gave him a little ribbing, and McKinney was asked about it afterwards at the media session. And he goes, all right, so we got one. But remember, it's 7-on-7, shirts and shorts, and, the quarterback had a lot of time to throw the ball. So Xavier wasn't really yielding on that very much, but it was a heck of a grab, and it ignited the crowd, obviously. They were just ecstatic to see it. And so that's where we were today. The Giants went through, let's see, 1, 2, 3 different deep red zone 7-on-7 drills. And so, folks, it's mostly passing. They'll run a couple of running plays out of those drills, but it's mostly passing drills. Daniel Jones was incredibly sharp, as expected. I thought that Tay Banks got a lot of reps. Darian Beavers got a lot of reps. Those are maybe a couple of players that people are curious about. But you can't really tell a whole lot from what you saw today. But it was great because at least nobody got hurt.
Sure, and that's always the positive. And it's nice to see the guys back out on the field. But I think, once again, you got to at least keep the conversation within perspective. That it's not the end-all, be-all in terms of what we see out of the first day of practice. A few reminders here, and you could also weigh in on the conversation at 201-939-4513, hashtag Giants Chat. Giants Huddle Podcast, you could check that out on your favorite podcast platform. You could also search for Giants Huddle and go to giants.com/podcast. We are inching closer to the start of the 2023 NFL season. It's officially out, the schedule. Single game tickets, they're on sale now. Don't miss the Giants at MetLife Stadium this season. You can visit giants.com/tickets to secure your seat, and you take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. Also, the Giants official connected TV streaming app. It's Giants TV. It brings you original video content, game highlights on demand, and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. So I mentioned Joe Shane and Brian Daboll spoke to the media to kick off today's festivities, and a lot of the dialogue was about Andrew Thomas and Saquon Barkley, but it was also about the expectations of this year's team. Both individuals were asked, and I think similar to what we were just discussing, Brian Daboll even joked a few times. He goes, it's day one of training camp, guys. Can you let me breathe another day or two before you ask me about what my bold prediction is for the team record?
We heard a couple of questions today about, can you see how the defense is coming together? Have you guys formulated an identity yet?
Well, I'm sure then Rick Martindale will be asked the same exact question, so you should prepare accordingly.
I get it. I get it. People have to come up with questions. It is the first day, and they need something to talk about. But, I mean, come on, folks. Let's get a little bit more into it and try to come up with something a little bit more intelligent than, how's the offense look to you so far today?
Only so much you could take away. But I did feel as if the generic census in terms of what both individuals had talked about was that they do feel good about where the depth of this roster is, Paul. And that's not a stretch at this time of the year. That what they set out to do in the offseason, specifically Joe Shane talked about this, that they purposely said to themselves, we want to make sure that we're in a position, God forbid there's any injuries. That's my interpretation. He didn't necessarily say that you feel as if the third guy or the fourth option on the depth chart can come in and answer the call accordingly.
Well, it's one thing to make the playoffs like the Giants did last season, but then the next step in your development is try to enhance the good areas of your team, but more importantly, enhance the depth of your team. That really, I said it in reverse order, but that is really the next important step. Now, you don't want to just stay status quo with your starters and add depth. No, you have to try to improve on your starters a little bit too. But if you can really enhance your depth so that you don't have a lot of placeholders on the back of your roster, that's when you know if you are a legitimate team that should be in the playoff conversation. Okay, really, that's what it comes down to, Lance. And I'm telling you right now, when they get to 53 before that Dallas game, you'll look at that 53 and you'll say to yourself, you know what? I could see every one of these guys being legit. I could see every one of these guys, even number 53, I could see him doing something to help this team this year. You could not say that in many of the past years of the last decade. there were many a times where you'd sit there and you'd say, oh, wow, the last 6 or 7 guys, 8 guys, 9 guys, they're placeholders. You're like, man, I hope they can find someone to pick up in the next week or two to be better than that guy, because if he plays, that's going to be a trouble, right?
Sure.
That's not the case now. Just not. That's why this is a significantly better team that I feel very confident saying they will be in the playoff conversation in December. Now, I'm not going to promise a playoff spot. I'm not even going to promise a number of wins right now. But they'll be in contention. I feel very strongly about that.
I think one of the most encouraging aspects that we saw last season, if you were to apply it to this year, is even if you did not feel the depth was as key last season compared to this year, the ability of this coaching staff to develop and take guys to the next level, I think bodes very well for this team.
Yes.
When you think about an Isaiah Hodgins, right, who came to the team mid-season, what he was able to accomplish. I understand he had ties to Buffalo, but you're throwing him into a more prominent role. Nick McLeod, another former Buffalo Bill. And remember, the staff on the defensive side of the ball here has no ties to the Bills. Wink Martindale didn't come from Buffalo, so Nick McLeod wasn't walking in right.
Joe Shane knew of him, though.
No, but what I'm saying is he knew nothing about Wink's system.
No.
That's
nothing.
Most important than whether or not the GM knows you.
Heck, Fabian Moreau didn't know anything about it
well,
either
there's another
last
example.
year.
Sure, yeah. So all of these examples that we're giving you, Paul, my point is, if they were able to accomplish that and there were question marks right on the back end because you didn't know a lot of these guys, they had not been in-house, now you're going to have a better grasp of those in-house back of the roster players who also some have familiarity already with your scheme. So that in the event we get a few weeks into the season and some guys go down due to injury, and that's just the nature of the beast. I'm not saying we wish that to happen. That's just the inevitable in the NFL. I think you feel a lot better that you've seen these players be put in these positions so that you're not necessarily treating it like it's a baptism type of by fire scenario.
To illustrate what you're talking about, I'm just going to list for the people out there, and bear with me a second here. Again, folks, please don't be afraid to call us, 201-939-4513. I see the lines are open. By all means, you don't have to listen to us the whole hour. You can call us and talk to us about it. 201-939-4513. Let's just go with the first set of deep red zone drills today in the 7-on-7. Let me just run something by
the players involved.
And you'll understand what we're talking about on how they're getting everybody involved. They're giving everybody a chance. And this is how you're going to sort things out on the depth chart, right? Okay, I'm just going to give you the touchdown passes, right? Jones touchdown pass to a diving Barkley. Taylor touchdown pass to Cager. Taylor touchdown pass to Sills. Think of them already, how many different names I've given you, right? Okay.
Now, and all were here last season, too, by the way.
Now we start the next series, all right? Jones touchdown pass to Campbell. Taylor touchdown pass to Pimpleton. Taylor touchdown pass to Sills. DeVito, what do I have here? DeVito touchdown pass to a diving Mickens. There's a veteran,
Jadon Mickens,
who's added his name to the mix during this offseason as a potential depth and slot guy, right?
Mainly a special teamer throughout his career,
right.
But yes.
But a guy who plays a position, all right? Yep. Jones touchdown pass to Waller. Jones touchdown pass to Bellinger. Jones touchdown pass to a diving Cole Beasley. How many names did I just give you?
Well, it also speaks volumes of the competition at those various positions.
You know?
Yeah.
And remember, don't panic, folks. I think I counted 10 touchdown passes out of 18 plays in the deep red zone in the first section of 7-on-7s. Don't freak out about the defense, okay? There's no contact. They're not beating each other up on the pass rush. They're not chucking each other at the line of scrimmage with jams and press. The DBs are not getting physical, nailing the receiver.
They're not impacting the play. I mean, that's what you're describing.
Right, right. Basically, It's flag football. All right, so don't freak out that I just gave you all that great stuff with the offensive passing game. Don't freak out and beat on the defense. Don't say that Dottino said the defense wasn't playing well. That's not what this is about, okay? This was simply about showing you how the Giants are spreading out the wealth and the opportunity to get a look at as many guys as they can, understanding they're going to have a lot of serious cuts on the depth chart, and I continue to say this, and I said this to somebody this morning, Lance, and I'm glad we got someone we want to talk to. But I said this to somebody this morning. You know, we talk about subs and matchups on defense. I think the Giants are going to do a lot of subbing and matching up with their skill positions on offense. I'm going to say to you right now, I think that Waller, Barkley, and Hodgins are going to be the three consistent players who are going to get by far the most snaps on offense at the skill position slots. I think all of the other guys at the skill positions, the tight ends, the wide receivers, and the backs, they're all going to be matchup players based on a given week, maybe even a given half. If they don't like the matchup in the first half, they might change something at halftime.
Yep.
I really think that's what we're going to see. And I think that's what the Giants are hoping to do because they want to create that Rubik's Cube problem for opposing defensive coordinators, just as they're doing it on the other side of the ball.
Well, and also, let's take it a step further. Brian Daboll came from New England, where Bill Belichick subscribes to that philosophy.
Absolutely,
and
he
even
does.
Mike Kafka coming from Kansas City, I would argue the Chiefs have always been known for having overwhelming depth. I mean, they bring some of these guys out of the woodworks, out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, they're either returning something on special teams or they're using them out of the backfield. So I would say both coaches on the offensive side of the ball who are involved in playmaking and play calling, they have a background in maximizing the volume and talent on the roster. So I'm with you there. That's why whenever we get questions, and we're going to open up the lines here in a second about, who do you anticipate will start? Starting is irrelevant, Paul. It's about who plays X amount of snaps.
Correct.
Being on the field for the first play doesn't mean much of anything when it's all said and done. Tell me at the end of the season the percentage of snaps you were on the field, not how many times you actually got out for the very first play.
I'll give you something better. Tell me how many games you win at the end of the season, not who played how many plays. How about that?
That goes without saying. I was just at least keeping in sync with the bulk of the conversation here on the offensive side of the ball and how personnel will be used. 201-939-4513 is the telephone number. We got Roy in Charleston. He joins us here on BBKL. What's happening, Roy? What do you got for us?
Hey, Lance. Hey, Paul. One of the things that I heard you say, Paul, was like Fabian Moreau. So we got about like a half a dozen players last year, mid-season, maybe a little later. And, the way we acquired those guys was a blessing. But what was even more amazing is their football smarts. They were able to take the playbook, a playbook they've never seen, offense and defense. They were able to digest it, and they were able to use it to their best. And that takes a lot. And you have to give the credit to the coaching staff because they were able to utilize that playbook to the strength of the player, the player's ability to absorb it, their football smarts, their ability to solve problems, and they really came up and just performed amazingly. So now here we are starting a new training camp, new season, and these guys we still have. So now they know the playbook. They've digested it even more. Their football smarts, they're just is growing.
Well, there's the familiarity component, which is what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah,
and that's exactly what we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
Yep. But that is so when you got guys like Joe Shane, Brian Gable, and Kafka, and Martindale, and so here you got our coaches, and they're looking at these players and go, I know a spot I can fit them in because they have the football intelligence to utilize the playbook, and I know and that's going to be exciting to see how now they're going to be surrounded by other guys. They're going to play off of each other. All the new guys that have come in, along with some of the guys who are already here that they played with last year, and I think that's going to make a phenomenal recipe for an extraordinary season. I think it's going to be a very good season. As long and Lance, I'm in your corner, buddy. We've got the depth. As long as we can keep the depth. And that was the other thing about last year is that we went into the depth chart so deep and pulled these players up, and they were able to accomplish what we went to the playoffs with these guys, and the first and second guys were out because of injury. So I think that having those guys again, being able to have that familiarity, not only with the playbook, but the coaching staff and the teaching of the coaches being able to teach so well to the strengths of these players, I think we have a great recipe for a great season this year. So it's going to be fun to watch.
All right,
as long as everyone can stay healthy, that's going to be.
Well, I think that's the key for every team in the NFL. And appreciate the phone call. He pretty much was echoing the sentiments that we had been discussing earlier in the show. The fact that you beef up the depth chart, you beef up the options. They know the playbook better. You feel a lot better that if you have to turn to them, that there won't be as big of a drop-off, right? Because that's what, Paul, every team is trying to circumvent in the NFL. How big is the drop-off when you lose a few of the main players that get the bulk of the snaps? Is it immense, or is it not as significant, so therefore you can still walk that fine line of being in the mix for just about every single game?
You know, every personnel department has a checklist of key elements that they're looking for in a player, their blueprint, if you will. Okay, this is the kind of guy I want. And sometimes it's a little more position specific than it is just generic. I think it's very obvious that the number one trait across the board for this front office is they want guys with high football acumen. There's no question about that. If you really have a great understanding for the game, you're going to be able to understand the complexities of the offensive and defensive playbooks. And that's going to allow our staff, so to speak, to coach you up in those areas to give you a chance to be productive. There are other organizations that honestly, and we've also seen in years past here too at times, where athleticism and pure traits may have been valued a little bit higher. I don't think that's the priority, not with what we've seen out of Joe Schoen in 2 years.
I also think that we've seen players who are smarter than the athletic player, and they last longer because of a reason, right? They make up for their lack of athleticism due to their intellect and due to their smarts.
And to be frank with you, I think that's part of what Joe Schoen kind of skimmed from Bill Parcells. He has said he has looked at Parcells as a mentor from their time together in Miami. And the Giants had a number of players, especially on their 2 championship teams with Parcells, who had all the intangibles, off the charts intangibles. Guys like Steve Diassi, for example. Gary Reasons, was another one of those guys where, you know what? Athletically, he did not fit all of the quotients, especially speed. Johnny Cooks, who recently passed away, another one of those guys. These guys became very important cogs on championship teams because of all their intangibles and their intelligence, more so than their 40 times or their bench press facts or figures.
And that's why you could tell what the coaching staff and what the front office is prioritizing because of the style and the type of player that they bring in. It's not necessarily always the flashy player that has all the hype surrounding them. It's somebody that makes sense in terms of their fit on the roster. Either they have a connection to a coach or based on their track record in the NFL, that's exactly the missing ingredient or the missing piece that the Giants need. 201-939-4513 is the telephone number. Let's head back to the phone lines. We got Coach Marvin in Delaware joining us here. What's happening, Coach Marvin? What do you got for us?
How you doing, Lance?
Doing all right.
And Paul?
Coach?
How you doing, Paul?
All good. How are you?
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Okay.
Come on now. You gotta get back on the phone.
Yeah, I do. I still listen every day. I'm still listening, and sometimes I just don't want to jump on, just start talking about anything.
I got you.
No, we
Save
respect
the
that.
call for some good stuff.
Yeah, I can call and say how you guys are doing sometimes. But, this is the best time of the year. This was usually my favorite time of the year is training camp, when we first start coming out there. Because this is the time where you just getting familiar with your players. And the only thing they're working on is their alignments. Everybody know their assignments. And it's like what we call perfect play in high school. We are running a lot of perfect play, not a lot of hitting. There's no hitting. Everybody has to stay off the ground. And like you said, they only have helmets and shorts on. So that's usually what's going to happen the first week or so. I think we would have we had something like 24 hours of no hitting.
Yeah, because you want to build up to it. The worst thing you could do is bring these guys back and then all of a sudden have them hit one another when they've had a few weeks away from each other.
Yes, and that's exactly right, because you're trying to lower those hits anyway. You don't want a lot of hitting all week, because the body's not really meant to play football, so you have to make sure you take care of their bodies and not just let them kill each other 5 straight days or 6 straight days.
Well, today, Coach, they ran through approximately 50 snaps in the deep red zone over the course of 3 different periods of the practice. And that was the most closely resembling type of football stuff that they did. Otherwise, everything else was drills and again,
continuation of the spring.
They don't want to beat these guys up day one.
No, they don't. They don't want to beat them up. They just want to see what kind of shape they're in. Can they understand the plays that are being presented to them and see how they can execute it without a lot of hitting going on.
Right.
And that'll come in a couple of weeks. They'll start doing that. But you guys were talking about Joe Shane, and wow, that's all I can say is wow. These guys are really putting their stamp on this team, and they're doing a great job. I still have a little concern with Barkley, because I'm in this sense, I'm talking like a fan. I would like to see something long term, and I know they can't do anything. I was glad they gave him incentives, and this is my thinking. I don't know. I would have loved to have been in the room. Was anything said to him about the next contract? And I know I get the feeling they're going to be negotiating something all year round, trying to talk through.
Well, but they can't, though. Like we just said, they cannot start discussing a new contract until after the season, Coach Marvin. So, I mean, that's not happening.
Okay.
Yeah, what you laid out. And I find it very hard to believe, even if there was some seeds planted about the future, who knows what the roster and the cap situation is going to look like at this time next year. It would all be hypothetical scenarios, which may not necessarily come to fruition anyway.
Right. That's why I said it was just my thinking, Lance. I didn't say that was going to be the truth. I was just saying that was my thinking. And you're correct. It's hypothetical. It was just, sometimes I'm like any other person. My mind's just going to start going and having these feelings and thoughts of what could be behind the scenes. And you're correct. And
Well,
right.
I think I didn't mean to cut you off. The way that I look at the NFL is it's a very fluid league, Coach Marvin. So the conversations you have on Tuesday may not hold much of anything by the time you roll out of bed on Wednesday. And then the conversations you have on Wednesday may not mean anything when you get to the following week. So that's why I don't put a lot of stock in conversations that may happen a year prior to a new set of negotiations, let's say.
And that's true. But just to throw a little bit more on that. That's just not football. That's life, period.
100%. Completely with you. Completely with you.
Tomorrow, it could be a totally different story. So you are correct in that. But, back to them, I think they did an excellent job. And everybody's talking about the season. I'm optimistic. I'm not a guy that come out, we're going to be, this is our record, and this is what I think we're going to do. You got to, this is August. And you got to look at what you have. And what I normally would be doing is thinking about the teams that I wouldn't have my team doing it, but I would be thinking about who was ahead of me. Who am I shooting for to make sure we're ready to play that game against that? We're ready to play every team, but there's one particular one you better really be ready to play over your head. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I think we have a good chance because it's really only 3 teams, I think, in the NFC that I'm really fearful of. That's San Francisco, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. I think we can play with those a little easier with those other teams. So those are the 3. And the big problem is Dallas and Philly is in our division. And we only won 1 game last year in that division.
Yeah.
And the other one is crazy. The last place team, which was Washington, they tied us. And they give us a fight in the second game also.
Yeah, well, there was almost 4 teams in the playoffs from the NFC East last season.
Today, Jones and Thomas and McKinney all spoke to the media, and Thomas was asked specifically, what did you do to close the gap on the Eagles? And he said, well, I think we're closing it, but it's got to start with the trenches, and we know that. It's got to be up front. That's where the Giants need to make a statement to Philadelphia. And, of course, they're not going to be able to do that till the last 3 weeks of the season when they play them twice.
Right.
I mean, that's that's kind of odd because you want them to be your measuring stick, right? You want to say, look, this is how close we're getting to those guys, and you're not going to be able to do it until Christmas.
Well, but in fairness, though, they will be playing the Niners and the Cowboys prior to that.
They will.
So, to Coach Marvin's point, you will have some tests well before that Eagles.
You will have some tests, but not the Eagles.
Right, but that big one, I think, is the first game. We got a month to get ready for it, and what you're saying about McKinney, what they're saying, and you're right, Paul. I think through this season, it's going to have to be done. Pretty much, I think football is won in the trenches. You got to have a front line, defensively and offensively.
Yes.
For you to dominate a game. Now, you can win some games with a weak offensive line. You can win some games with a weak defensive line. But I don't know how far that's going to take you when you start playing some dominant teams that do have an offensive line.
Well, it's going to be a rude awakening. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and Coach Marvin,
exactly.
We'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring. And we've seen that in the NFL. That's why the cliched line, it's a week-to-week league, holds a lot of weight. Because how many times, Paul, do you see a team play one opponent, and then all of a sudden it is the complete opposite end of the spectrum the following week? We've even seen it with Giants games, right? They look like world beaters one week, and then you get that wake-up call the following week. So that's more of a reason why I understand the point you want to be tested. I was going to say, if Andrew Thomas, if I put myself in his shoes and they asked me that question, my response would be, ask me once we get to like week 14 how we have closed the gap, right? Because, I mean, you can't answer that question on day one of training camp.
No.
I mean, they're still competing for roster spots here.
I will say this, though, that most of the time you'll see him going up against Thibodeau in practice. That's Thibodeau's side, right? So we already know that Thomas is a premier left tackle. He's proven that. Well, what better tool to help raise Thibodeau's game than to put him up against Thomas? I mean, again, I go back to Parcells. He used to tell the coaches all the time, tell Jumbo to stay out there. They didn't have anybody who could work against Lawrence Taylor in practice. And so
I don't think most teams had that.
Right? So Jumbo would have to take all the snaps sometimes in practice, even through two-a-days, because there's nobody. Lawrence would get on the practice field and just destroy everything.
Well, I said, he did that against other guys on other teams too.
And Jumbo will tell you to this day, if you talk to him, he will tell you that made him better. To have to go up against Lawrence, maybe through a whole two-a-day, that taught him something because it was survival. If he didn't get better, Lawrence was going to chew him up too.
What you're saying, there's a reason why the Eagles and Cowboys are an extremely balanced team, because the defensive line tests the offensive line, vice versa.
If that's why it really helps, both of those units will grind on each other and make each other better.
Let's head back to the lines. We got Mike in Indiana joining us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Mike? What do you got?
Hey, Lance. Hey, Paul. How you guys doing today?
Doing very well.
How are you?
Great. So I think it was John and you, Lance, on Monday kind of spoke a little bit on some bold predictions here and there for the season. Is that right? Or was it?
Well, we were talking about the Cover 4, the latest installment of Cover 4 on Giants.com, where the question was bold predictions for training camp. So that's where that came from, that conversation.
And by the way, we're not sticking bold predictions on the wall behind us, okay? We're not putting pins or tacks in this beautiful
keeping it clean.
set.
That's what we're doing.
Okay, it's going to be nice and clean,
pristine,
just like it is. All right, so no more bulletin board.
But, Mike, if you wanted to make a bold prediction, that's fine. We're all ears.
Yeah, absolutely. So, bold prediction for the year, 1,000-yard player, not receiver, 1,000-yard player named not Darren Waller. And then, to speak on that and who I think it might be, the one of the two players, I believe Isaiah Hodgins is going to separate himself or Darius Slayton is going to separate himself as our true number one this year. One or the other. Another slight bold prediction, Barkley getting his contract, great for him. Love it. Looking forward to this year.
Hold on. Are you taking Slayton or Hodgins then to be that guy? Which one is it? I'm writing this down.
Okay, you're marking this down.
Yeah.
All right, I've been a Slayton guy.
You're going
his
Slayton?
Whole career since he's been with the Giants. I would like to stick that right on Slayton. I feel like he's the guy who's going to surprise everyone in this offense. He's been kind of like that wart that you just can't get rid of off the team. He's stuck around. He wants to be with Daniel. I'm not saying he's a wart. I think he's a great player, great guy. But he's just been around, hasn't left the building. And I think this is his year. He signed that deal this year. What was it, a 2-year with a couple million each year deal this off season? And I feel like this might be his breakout year. 1,000-yard receiver, not named Darren
I understand
Waller.
your logic. I will only say right now, my logic is Hodgins is going to get more snaps than Slayton, I think, in this offense, which would give him a better chance to reach it. But I'm not going to poo-poo your thoughts because obviously Darius Slayton has ability. He's had over 700 yards, I believe, twice. Well,
he had 724 last season. But what you were talking about, Paul, also the targets. It's not so much the snaps, too. It's the targets, right? You could play a lot of snaps. If you're not targeted, how are you going to get to 1,000 yards?
Right, exactly.
That's the bigger question.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And I think what helps Slayton on that is the big playability. You know, those 40-plus, 50-plus, 60-yard-plus plays that he has in his back pocket. And then real quick to speak on two more things. Saquon Barkley, love it, great. Angry runner this year, not necessarily a bold prediction, kind of wishful thinking. I would like to see him get back to that 2,000 all-purpose yards like he was from his rookie season. Wouldn't we all? That would be amazing. I think we might see the same Barkley, but an evolved Barkley this year, maybe a little bit more angry. Some of the interviews in the offseason that he talked about, he trained all season last year to be more of like a pass-catching back, and then post-bye week, they just kept feeding him the ball 30, 40 times a game past the bye week. I hope that they get Saquon more involved in the pass game, more balanced throughout the season, and don't just lean on Saquon the rest of the season. And last thing, real quick, and I'll take my answer off the lines, is this 3-week period that we had, you all did an amazing job filling in with the podcast, everything else. You all did a great job, but I want to give a shout-out to the callers, the likes of Lynn, the likes of Crazy Charlie, the likes of Hugo, just keeping it absolutely entertaining with all this crazy nonsense left and right, just out of nowhere. It's awesome. Great to be a Giants fan, like you said yesterday, every day, Paul. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
All right,
Mike,
appreciate
thank you.
the phone call.
I guess entertaining is probably one word you could use for Charlie.
Well, I was going to say, when Charlie is the guy that you hang your hat on to make the case for callers, I don't know if necessarily there's a lot of substance and stock behind that point. I will leave it at that.
Oh, my.
With respect to Saquon Barkley, just to go over the numbers, he was targeted 76 times last season.
Yeah.
Now, you want to say...
57 catches?
I just had the numbers up here, and then I got away from them. I think it was in that ballpark.
I think it was 57
in terms of what he finished. But I noticed the targets. That's what stood out to me from that standpoint. But the reason I bring that up is, 76 targets, 57 catches is what he had. You just wonder, how much more are you going to try to feed him, especially with Darren Waller?
He caught 91 in the first year of his NFL career.
Well, but once again, you didn't have Darren Waller on the team. You didn't have all these receivers. That's my point.
You did not.
So you have to be realistic. If he got 76 targets last season, you say, well, give him more. Where is he going to get more? You're going to have to take away opportunities from other players.
I do think he'll have, even if he only has a few more receptions this year, he's going to have a lot more receiving yards. Because I think that the defenses are going to have a lot more holes in them due to the skill positions that the Giants are throwing out there into the formations, which means if Barkley catches a ball, he should have a lot more space to operate within.
And I can see that because he finished with just over 300 receiving yards last season.
And that's not a lot.
No, that's not a lot at all. So I could absolutely see that. And perhaps if he doesn't get many opportunities on the ground as he did last season because the volume of carries was up there. Maybe they work in a Matt Breida or an Eric Gray. I'm just throwing it out there. The way you make up for that is you maybe dump the ball off to him and have him involved in terms of the receiving game. Let's head back to the lines. We got Angelo in Dallas joining us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Angelo? What do you got for us?
I'm from P-Dot. How y'all doing? Hope you're doing
Hi.
all right.
You're doing well.
Question regarding our defense and Wink. So I know one of the pain points was our running game, which was illustrated by Wink, who said that, and I think the ownership said it as well. Do y'all agree that it was kind of a personnel and the system that Wink was implementing, running a lot of man and a lot of blitz pressures? And do you think that we've addressed to the best that we would be able to address the personnel issue by getting more defensive linemen, the linebacker, And if so, what about the system itself? Do you think Wink has the wherewithal to say, okay, let me go ahead and update it or change it? And what changes would you expect if he does?
2,000%. Does the Wink have the wherewithal to make those adjustments? Oh, he absolutely does. Are you kidding me? He's salivating this summer as to now he's got a 3-down middle linebacker who can cover and, by the way, also blitz. So that's going to be fun, what he does with Okereke. We know that, they drafted Banks on the corner for a reason, because he's a tough physical corner who can play press man, which, they played a lot more zone than people would have expected last year because they had to. So then you look at the defensive line. They added defensive line depth because they knew that last year they gave up over 5 yards a carry, and that's not exactly a recipe you want to live by. So, yeah, totally. They've enhanced a number of areas on their defense that should allow Wink to even be more creative in what he wants to do. That's really the short answer to what you're asking.
And on the topic of defensive linemen, to me, the biggest issue was when Dex would come off the field.
It was a problem.
Didn't have somebody who was suitable to fill the void. Whereas now, with A'Shawn Robinson, who's starting off the regular season, well, training camp, I should say, on PUP, but that hopefully shouldn't be a long-term issue. That was based on an injury he suffered with the Rams. And Nacho, that you feel pretty good that you can give Dexter a breather and there won't be as significant of a drop-off. So that's where I think they really improved from that standpoint, because to me it wasn't so much the defensive line depth maybe next to Dex. It was just when Dex was off the field, who were you turning to under those circumstances?
But I forgot about that, and that's true. But I believe that Dex played up in the 90%.
Oh, he did. But for the few times that they did take him off the field, just go back and watch what opposing offenses did. They said, "Oh, Dex is off the field. We're going to run it exactly where Dex would have been lined up."
Look, I know that Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams are competitors, and they really probably don't want to come out of the game at all. But let's just say you had the chance to play those guys 80% of the snaps instead of 90+% each and every week. Well, in theory, the idea is that, A, those backups can hold their own and do a solid job and be functional, and B, the 80+% that you get out of Williams and Lawrence will be that much better because they will have had those snaps off.
Yeah, because they're not as tired. If you remember, and I just looked it up, he did not play 90% of the snaps.
What was it this year?
Yeah, he played 76% of the snaps.
Was it that low?
Yeah, so it wasn't as high as you thought, Angelo, in terms of how much Dex played last season.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, he did. Yeah, but I mean, even with that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, 81%.
It wasn't over 90 this
year.
It's
not 90.
It wasn't over 90
It's still
this
a noticeable difference.
2 years ago it was, though.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, 80 versus 90, 95, which is what most people think. I mean, that's
no doubt.
That's
no
a big
doubt.
difference.
We're throwing out numbers here, and we shouldn't do that without actually looking them up. The philosophy still stays the same. You should get better efficiency out of Williams and Lawrence if you can give them a little bit more time off.
The last question I'll take and answer off the air is, outside of our two edge rushers, we got Ojulari and our rookie from last year, I forgot.
Kayvon, you talk about.
Thibodeau.
Yeah.
So who do y'all think will be 3, 4, and 5, or should I say to be 3, 4, and 5? See it. I haven't seen Ojulari play a full season yet, or all season in this game. So
sure.
Who do y'all think will be 3, 4, and 5? And I'll take it off there.
All right, Angel. Yep. Appreciate the phone call. And this is a conversation that we've had on previous shows, too, because, we said there are opportunities in terms of the pass rush, right, beyond the two guys. And Jihad Ward is a guy that I would throw into this conversation, but he's not a big sack guy. He's just do it everything, every which way, and hustle from angle to angle and sideline to sideline. Yeah, correct.
Against a power running team, Ward's going to be on the field a lot.
Yeah, but you need an energizer bunny like that.
Sure.
So I'm just saying, if you're looking for a sack guy, if that is what the question was all about, then I think you're probably turning to some of the younger guys taking the next step forward. I mean, Tamon Fox is a guy that comes to mind, right?
Correct.
We saw some flashes out of him, so he would be a strong candidate. We were talking about Ellerson Smith, but he was waived injured the other day. So O'Shane Zimenez, if he can carve out a spot, the opportunity may be there for him. I had thrown out Abba Baldonado, the undrafted kid out of Pitt. If he makes the team, I think there's potential there based on his resume. But, I mean, notice we're going very deep into the depth chart at this point. So to me, Tamon Fox is probably the leader in the clubhouse.
The question becomes, and I guess we've already lost the caller, the question becomes, was he just looking for the third, fourth, or fifth option in terms of outside linebackers, or was he looking for who's going to be like the third leading sack guy on the Giants? Well, I mean, because it's very clear that a guy like Dexter Lawrence or Leonard Williams could easily wind up being in the top 3 on the Giants sack list. But they're not edge guys, so I'm not sure what his question was.
My interpretation of the question was edge guys, the guys that are going to be pass rushers, not guys that are just going to be getting sacked. Because, yes, Dex does fit that bill.
And I want to make something clear. Now, maybe it'll come out differently by the time they get to the season. But don't be shocked if you see some blitzing out of Okereke. He might wind up being a little bit more of a pass rush guy than some people think.
He did that in Indy.
He has the ability to slice through gaps, and he even has the opportunity to. He played some outside linebacker with the Colts for a year. He can come off the edge, so you can do a lot of things with him.
That's why that's maybe one of the most intriguing spots to watch for.
That's a really big addition. I don't think a lot of people gave him his proper due when he came over from the Colts. I mean, they're not exactly a very popular defense. He's not a
household name, I think.
He's just not.
From a national standpoint.
He's just not. More people will think about Darius Leonard when they think about the Colts defense.
The artist formerly known as Darius Leonard.
Yes.
Shaq Leonard, yes.
Yes, I get it. Yes. I get it. He's Darius Leonard to me.
Listen, he wants to be called that. I'm just trying to follow the rules. Yes.
The point being, though, that Okereke is somebody you shouldn't be sleeping on.
No, I'm completely with you. Because once again, if you're going to invest in a linebacker, it should be a linebacker that without any hesitation can be on the field for all 3 downs. And Okereke has proven that throughout the course of his career. The other thing is, if we're just going to get more into the sack dialogue and sack conversation, it could very well be piecemeal. The third option.
Yeah, sure.
Right? There may not be one player in particular that emerges to be the third guy. It could be matchup,
right,
week to week, and you could have one guy with 2 sacks, another guy with 3, 3.5, 4. Because remember, until we see it happen, I'll continue to throw out this statistic. Nobody has ever had a double-digit sack season under Wink.
I know.
Okay, and that even is for guys like Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon, the top of the mountain. So, based on what we've seen routine-wise for Wink, he spreads the wealth. And part of that is, I think, how many guys play, how many guys are in the rotation. So there may not be a household one guy who is the third option when it's all said and done. I would not be surprised.
Some of that, and I'm not going to use it as an excuse because it's not all of it, but some of the reason for that is he wants to confuse the offense.
Yep.
He is so much predicated on what I'm going to do to mess you up mentally with all of my schematics, that he doesn't want one guy to have 15 sacks and everybody else to have 3 or less. No, he'd much rather have 5 or 6 guys have 7 apiece, as opposed to having a very top-heavy scale. And that's fine. I mean, that's what works for him.
19 different players had at least half a sack last season.
That's a lot.
But that's the definition of Wink's defense.
Yeah.
Because if you did the same number exercise with his days in Baltimore, you would find very similar results. Mm-hmm. And all I'm saying is...
And they had some good players.
100%. They had very good players, correct. But it turns out that that's the result more often than not. So I would expect nothing different with respect to this season. As that is going to wrap up Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back up and running again on Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Today's episode is part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest as we now move towards day 2 of 2023 training camp. We'll speak to you on Thursday. Have a good one.